Jamie McIntyre is there. Jamie, what are you hearing?
Well, Aaron, there is a lot of confusion here at the Pentagon. It appears that something hit the Pentagon on the outside of the 5th corridor, on the Army corridor. Several Army officers I talked to reported hearing a big explosion, seeing shards of metal coming past their window. The Pentagon has been evacuated. Emergency services personnel were rushing to reports of several people trapped in the building. Most of the building's 24,000 people are outside of the building or in the center courtyard as emergency teams try to sort out what has happened here. There is, of course, thick black smoke billowing from the scene. There is a lot of confusion. The Defense Protective Service, which is the police force here in the Pentagon, has been urging people to get out of the building and move away from the scene so they can handle the emergency situation. Again, it appears that an aircraft of some sort did hit the side of the Pentagon, the west front, which faces sort of toward Arlington National Cemetery. It's a corridor where a lot of Army offices are located.
Wow.
And some people were...
Jamie, I need you to stop for a second. There has just been a huge explosion. We can see a billowing smoke rising, and I'll tell you that I can't see that second tower.
So that was your first report of the day, and then you came outside to the
So then I decided that and again the buildings. People said to me, "Well, weren't you worried that something was going to happen to you?" Everybody was evacuating the building, but it's so big. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel any threat at all. I felt like I could get up whenever I wanted.
There was smoke coming down the hallway.
There was some smoke beginning to come down the hall. In fact, I have pictures of this. Of the smoke coming down the hallway, mm-hmm. and some of the other things I took that day on my blog, lineupdeparture.com, where I've posted pictures I took with my small digital camera in the course of the day, including you can see the hallway outside our office filling up with smoke, and you can see outside the Pentagon on the river entrance where Secretary Rumsfeld's battle wagon is there to whisk him away, but he doesn't actually go. He stays in the Pentagon.
His security detail, the Pentagon security detail, wanted to, as you said, whisk him from the building, put him in his war wagon, and go racing off. And he said, no, I'm going to wherever whatever it is that happened, I'm going there. And he was watching it on television, too. And he rushed to the scene from the interior of the building and eventually made his way out to the exterior of the building through the crash scene, which went through a couple of rings of the Pentagon. It was, it's a plane crash. It's an airliner. And here comes Donald Rumsfeld at the age of 71 or whatever he was at the time, holding the corner of a litter of a stretcher with injured coming out. And he's out there with his hiking shoes on, which he wore every day, and bringing the wounded out. He's the Secretary of Defense. His security detail was going berserk. They wanted to get him out of there, but that's not.
And he got criticized for that afterwards by some people, and I just have to say that he was only there a very short time before he went back at attending to the business at hand, and I think he reacted the way any normal human being is. He needed to get out there and see what was going on. Mm-hmm. They needed a hand on this particular stretcher. And he immediately went back to the work of worrying about the nation's security. And I thought that whole criticism that that he shouldn't have been there was misplaced.
We ended up that afternoon and evening across Route 27 to the west of the Pentagon, to the west of the scene of the crime, the crash site, the site of the attack, and we were in the parking lot of what was then a Citgo gas station. And that's where we basically set up. I think, may have started, but the rest of the media gathered there, and it became the impromptu media site. Pentagon officials came over, Ken Bacon, and I think it was Admiral Quigley.
Admiral Quigley was the spokesperson.
Craig Quigley, and they came over to the site and briefed from that location throughout the afternoon, with the scene behind us, behind the Pentagon spokesman, and that became sort of our base of operations. We were operating out of the front seat of my car and charging our cell phones on my car lighter, and moving our camera crews across town was very difficult because the town had basically shut down. And
I got to that site of the gas station across from the Pentagon through kind of an interesting way. I had, as you mentioned, I had come out the Pentagon. I came out on the river entrance side. I stood outside waiting for this additional plane
which is the far side of the building, all the way on the other side.
It has
of the
parade route that faces Washington, D.C. Yeah. And I heard these announcements that there might be another plane heading to the Pentagon, and I just sort of sat out there and waited. I had my camera ready in case something happened, but the plane never came, and I eventually made my way around to the crash site, and as I said, I took pictures of the crash site and some of the wreckage, and eventually somebody came up to me and said, who are you? And I said, I'm the CNN correspondent. They said, well, we're moving all the media over to this gas station across the street, and I'd already seen everything that I was going to see. So I was walking back over, and as I crossed away from the scene, they were beginning to put up police tape, and I crossed this police tape, and so I was outside the area that was cordoned off, and I looked back, and I saw the police tape across there, and the fire engines pouring water on the building, and it just looked like a picture to me. So I took my camera, and I took a picture of that scene. And when I took the picture, a Pentagon police officer came up to me and told me I was violating the Pentagon's ban on photography, and I was going to have to turn over my camera. And I said to him, I can't give you my camera. I'm a news reporter. I'm covering this story, which apparently he interpreted as some sort of, digital salute or something.
An act of defiance.
A refusal of a lawful order or something. And the next thing you know, he was slapping me in handcuffs. And I kept telling him, I said, you don't have to handcuff me. I'm not going to resist. I'm just telling you I think you're doing the wrong thing, but you have the badge and the gun. I don't. But he did. He arrested me, and I was in handcuffs for about 15 minutes. And but eventually he figured out that there was this other big thing going on, and there was a kind of a funny moment where he went over to talk to another police officer, and I couldn't see what they were saying. But you could tell just from sort of the facial expressions, it was kind of like, oh, okay, you arrested him, you figure out what to do with him, because, we're kind of busy here.
Yeah.
So eventually he walked me over to the site where the media was, and when I suggested he might want to take the handcuffs off because the CNN camera would be recording the event as I walked up, and it would probably look bad to be arresting, reporters covering the story. And he told me,
a lot of people might like that.
Exactly, maybe they would. He thought about it for a little while, and then he did take the handcuffs off. Yeah, so I got arrested on September 11th for covering the story.
Congratulations. And your camera?
He kept my camera, and he kept my press pass because he told me I would never be set foot in the Pentagon again. Mm-hmm. He gave me back my tape recorder and my cell phone. And I got the camera back 3 or 4 days later. All the images were intact, although I'm sure some conspiracy theorists think that, they were planted.
They were tampered with, right, exactly. Yeah. Well, and one of the things, you mentioned that there was a humorous moment, and that sounds peculiar, I'm sure, in the context of a situation like this to someone who wasn't there, who hasn't been in, a circumstance like this one. The reality is that I and you and pretty much everyone that we came into contact with that day at that location was entirely professional. We'll set aside the police officer in that situation.
Well, he was just trying to do
I'm
his
sure
job.
He's a swell guy.
Yeah.
But the reality is that people were very much themselves. I was not, you were not, the people we were working with weren't really traumatized by the event that we saw unfolding that day. We were focused on what we were doing, and because we were, and what we had to do, and anticipating what we were going to have to do next, and knowing that this was going to be a long, hard slog, to borrow a phrase, for all of us. And there certainly were moments from people in all roles. There were very human moments. I did see some people getting emotional, but for the most part, people were focused, serious, straightforward, doing what they needed to do, very much going about their business, whatever that business was. And there were moments where people were exchanging, little bits of humor, and there were smiles, knowing that what we were witnessing was, again, the Pearl Harbor of our time, and that this was history, knowing that there were people killed.
But, it's very much like, and I don't want to compare us to soldiers in battle because it's a completely different thing, but whenever you talk to some service member who's performed some, heroic feat, they always say something like, well, I wasn't really thinking, it's my training just kicked in.
Right.
And that's kind of what happens in these situations. You're a reporter, you've got to do certain things, you've got to try to nail down the facts, and you are just focused on that. And I do remember very vividly sitting with you in your car in that parking lot, and just you and me talking about how the entire world had just changed.
Yeah.
But, talk about how you're affected by, and I never felt traumatized by it at all. And people have asked me since then, you know, hasn't this affected you psychologically because you were there? And I have to say no. But you know when it really hit me,
I would have to say no also. And I don't know if that's cold or what, but it.
But you know when it really hit me was the next day. You know, we worked all day and into the night that night, late into the night, and I got up the next morning and had to go back to the Pentagon, and I went to the hall closet in our house and I pulled out the American flag that, like, you know, a lot of people I displayed on Flag Day and 4th of July and that sort of thing. I thought, well, this is a day I should put the flag out this morning. And I went and dug the flag out, and I was putting it in the little, you know, post on my front porch to display it. And that's when I started to really feel it. That's when I felt like I was going to break down and start crying. The next day, when I started thinking about, you know, what had happened to our country and what had happened to the people at the Pentagon and the World Trade Center and how awful the whole thing was, and what a long battle we were going to be into, that's when it really affected me.